seems like every single time we turn around the corner, we find that justice and peace are crying out loud, not only here in the church, but also in the world. Now, justice, in the end, is not what a lawyer may tell us what we need to do, but what truth tells us that we ought to do. And the truth is that we, as human beings, we are all equal. And that is the basic of justice. And this is not just to make it into a slogan, or may sound too much of a cliche, but we have to keep in mind that justice is something that belongs to every human being. And therefore it translates into human dignity as such. So the moment we begin to ignore human dignity, chances are greater that soon we will ignore human rights. Thus, as a matter of fact, we are only too aware of the unjust forces around the world which tread upon the basic human rights of people. And some of these human rights violations are risen to a greater scale which make us focus on them exclusively. And they may prompt us to pull our hair out full of indignation. But justice is not violated only on the great sphere. Justice suffers on a smaller scale as well. How? For most of us, being persecuted for justice's sake is not going to mean anything. It is going to mean perhaps an endless bunch of things that we may suffer on our daily basis. That we may suffer when we have our human rights violated perhaps at a school, family, place of work, or daily interactions. Maybe just small things. However, we are called to react to these unjust circumstances. And how you, me, we as a community react to the injustices in the world and the injustices in our lives as well. The angle from which we all look at the source of injustice will differ. Therefore, it depends on the angle from which we look at it. There was a priest who once in the Holy Land, he looked at the sky on Christmas Eve. And he saw the bottom of the moon hang like a huge orange slice over Bethlehem. But he realized that back in his home, he always saw a half moon tipped on its side, with its left half missing. So he realized that the moon too appears different from different angles. Likewise, a person who doesn't believe in God may look at the unjust persecutor as the enemy. And perhaps the first reaction probably be to seek revenge on the first opportunity this person has. And this gives us as a result a kind of wild justice. However, we as Christians look at those who inflict suffering upon us from a different angle. An angle which is hardly understood in the world. An angle of love and forgiveness. Because a Christian is aware that they themselves stand before God as forgiven sinners by the cross of Christ. Before the cross of whom offered for all times a single sacrifice for sins, and is seated forever at the right hand of God, as we have heard in the letter to the Hebrews. He who places all those who belong to him in an ongoing and individual process of sanctification. So in this way, the first reaction of a Christian towards injustice must be to forgive without counting the cost, even though this may sound exaggerated to us. And yet, that is the first reaction we are to have. But we got to be careful though. A forgiving attitude is by no means an attitude of indifference to the unjust social situation, nor does it mean a withdrawal from oppressive human concerns. It does mean dealing with injustice from a Christian perspective. keeping into account our Christian values and our Christian morals. Oh yes, we as Christians, we have the right and duty not only to proclaim justice, but also to join in the pursuit of justice. And how is it so? By actively participating in works of justice and peace. We have to begin this work by first being ourselves just towards God. And it goes in line with what we heard a couple of weeks ago in the Gospel of Mark. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Thus my justice towards God compels me that I can only repay God's forgiveness of sins by forgiving my neighbor's injustice to me. So there is something we have to keep in mind. To forgive the injustices of others is not only our justice towards God, but also it is the first step in establishing a just society. Now, forgiveness is key in the works of justice. For when we Christians forgive the unjust persecutors, this forgiveness, believe me, lights up a trail of peace that spreads not only between the persecutor and the one who have been inflicted the injustice, but it spreads to families, to communities, to cities, to the world. Thus, it is paramount to each of us to work tirelessly in the efforts of spreading forgiveness around us, on seeking avenues that may make us come together as a broader community in a world which is so messed up, dealing with so many scourges like abortion, euthanasia, abandoned children, indifference, inequality, injustice, persecution. We can contribute a small part by rolling up our sleeves and start sowing the seeds of forgiveness. And you may wonder how. This month, for example, is dedicated to palliative care here at St. Michael's. And it may not be until we are aware of the many needs of our community that we come to know the diversity of ways that we can become channels of forgiveness and channels of peace in our own community. By consoling the lonely hearts of senior citizens who live within our community, by journeying with the families of a terminal patient, by being medics on this field hospital, in striving to warm the hearts and heal the wounds. And even though we may be aware that the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few, each of us are called to serve one another according to our own talents. So remember what we heard in today's first reading. Those who lead the many to righteousness, to justice, through love, forgiveness, and peace, shall live forever and shall shine brightly like the stars forever and ever.